Hello and welcome to Sparks. I'm joined today by Ad Rebirth from Rebirth Radio, and we're going to be talking about a fantastic Beat the Clock from 1979 from Sparks' Number One in Heaven album. We're going to be going through line by line and beat by beat and breaking the whole thing down. And I hope you enjoy what we've got to say about it. So, welcome, Ad. How's it going? Are you
Hi.
keeping well?
Yeah, good, doing well. Hope you're doing well. And
Yeah,
thanks
good,
to
thank you.
everyone who's watched and commented. It's been amazing just seeing the reaction people have had and the ideas people have. So let's bring it on for the fourth time.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I love reading all the comments. I love what people have got to say about it. So many people have got the same passion that we've got for this amazing music, and going into it in this depth, it helps us appreciate the songs even more. I thought I couldn't like these songs anymore, but every time I do a video, it gets better.
I agree. I mean, it stands up to analysis. It withstands scrutiny. It's like you can hold a microscope up to it and it doesn't fall apart. If anything, you look at the kind of beauty of it and the technical achievement, and it makes. I mean, I've all the songs that we've talked about, I like even more, having done
Yeah,
this, and I listen to them with even fresh ears, and even now I hear things that even after we've talked about them,
yeah,
you're like, oh
yeah.
wow, what did I think of that?
I noticed something new in this song about 5 minutes before joining this session to talk to you. It's a
Yeah,
song that I've known for decades, and
yeah.
I'm still hearing new things in it. And yeah, that's the great thing about Sparks. So with that in mind, shall we listen to the intro of Beat the Clock?
Okay, well, so now our kind of meta narrative, or one of many, many meta narratives, is that they're very much talking about what they're doing, and they're talking about music business and their role within it and the changing nature of being in a band. And my own personal take on this, I don't know if you agree, but is that they're kind of the songs that we're listening to in roughly in the order, if not the exact order they recorded it. So I'm just going with that as a kind of almost like a journal, a diary, and I really feel like we're in the studio with them, and I feel like we're going through the recording process with them. So we're at track 4 now. I believe this was always intended to be a 6-song album. I think that was kind of part of the format, the sort of extended, shorter length in terms of number of songs, but longer songs. So I suspect they probably knew, this is track 4. My feeling is that they pushed the boat out experimentally really far with things like La Dolce Vita, sonically, experimentally, lyrically, and then outlined their manifesto lyrically. Maybe we could say they talked about, their own abilities and how good they are and what they can do, and that their desire to sort of subvert disco, maybe.
Hmm.
They've actually got to do it. To quote amateur art, it's a time to put in practice. And I think that's the sense I get with Beat the Clock. Also, maybe time and money. I don't know how long they had the studio booked for. Was Donna Summer kind of peering through the window? How long are you going to be, Georgia? I've got an album to record. Was there lots of pressure from record companies? One way or another, I just get the sense that they had to beat the clock, which is bringing us to the song and their mindset, I'm assuming, when they're recording it. We've got to have a hit. We've got to do something. We've got to do what we've been talking about. We've got to actually break through to the public consciousness. It's all well and good writing about it and experimenting, but this has to make it to Top of the Pops. This has to make it to Cracker Jack. This has to make it to children singing in the streets. So I just feel they went all in mentally on having a hit record with this one. And no one knows for sure, but the facts speak for themselves. Certainly in the UK, top 10 hit, their first top 10 hit, I think, since probably even Amateur Hour. Certainly in terms of public profile, a song that everyone knows. And do you know what? Here's how far its reach went. Do you remember Stars on 45? they did these quite cheesy mashups. There's even a little quote on their Beatles medley. It just goes, "You got to beat the clock. You got to beat the clock."
Let's do it! You gotta beat the clock! You gotta beat the clock!
Really random, but it just shows the reach of this song that this really did go mainstream. It kind of broke them to a whole new level, I think, of basically public awareness.
Yeah, that's
So
right. Because
yeah,
in the United Kingdom, most people in the streets, if they know Sparks, they'll know this town ain't big enough for the both of us, or they'll know Beat the Clock. It was a big hit over here, wasn't it? It feels like the people who liked Beat the Clock weren't necessarily the same fans who liked This Town Ain't Big Enough for the both of us. It feels like
uh,
they were starting again, but yeah, I completely agree. It does sound like it was made to be a single. It's probably the most commercial song on the album. I'd say. Would you agree with
absolutely.
that? Mm,
Totally. I mean, for one thing, it's the shortest song on the album.
mm,
I think it's about 4:20 or something.
mm,
So it's a lot more, and we've talked a lot about the kind of extended format of the songs
mm,
with these big long instrumental sections. Now it's still kind of got one. We'll talk about that, but all in all, it is a lot more condensed down.
mm.
And to get sort of into the music of the intro, it's straight in. There's no kind of minute of weird noises. You know, it's straight in here with the pulse, with the kick. Now, one thing I want to say about the groove of the song is that if you remember in tryouts, we talked about how you had these kind of very intricate 16th beat verses,
Mm,
and
mm.
then this sort of weird kind of almost I called it like a drunken amble eighth beat chorus.
Mm.
It's the
Yeah.
other way around. It's the other way around in Beat the Clock.
Oh,
And I would
okay.
maybe more conventional and more intuitive in terms of being mainstream. So the general pace of the song is on the eighth beat, and that's a lot more easy to latch onto. I think it's a lot more radio in a sense. It's more pop and less sort of techno in a sense. It's simpler.
Yeah,
No,
yeah,
down
very immediate, isn't it?
yes. Now we'll
Mm.
come on to the intricacies later because being Sparks, of course, it's going to happen, but not
Yeah,
in the. It saves
yeah,
that. Oh, it's very simple, very metronomic,
mm.
literally clock like kissed. You've got that simple bass synth, and then those high kind of
Yeah.
insistent, like
When
almost
you,
like a
yeah,
well,
it's almost like an alarm sometimes,
it is. That's
isn't
it.
it?
Yeah,
It's
that's what I meant.
it's like a slight air of panic to it.
Yes,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
absolutely.
yeah. Kind of a bit annoying, like an early digital watch movie.
Yeah, it's interesting what you said about clock like as well,
Yes,
because Sparks have got this amazing ability to like marry the music with the words, and
yes,
that makes pure sense. It's such a mechanical thing. Obviously, this wasn't digital, but it was very. This was like a machine-like period for Sparks music. So the idea of writing a song based around like the metronomic beat of a clock.
yeah,
Yeah, I think that's
absolutely.
really interesting. It's the music informing the lyrics, and I
Yes,
get the impression that that's how they work a lot. I think they'll. Apparently, Ron writes the lyrics as the very last part of the process.
okay, yeah.
Therefore, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if him listening to all these arpeggiators and all this high tech equipment that
Yeah.
informed the chorus to well the whole song of Beat the Clock, the whole concept of it.
Well, I mean, you have clocks in recording, and I mean, definitely with MIDI, but even before MIDI. And in fact, based on one of the comments, thank you very much to that person who commented with some real technical stuff about what they might
Yeah, that was
use.
great.
There was probably some sort of clock interface, or the word clock would have been in the studio, time clock of some sort. So,
Yeah.
and also, yeah, just generally, this was, yeah, digital watches. There was that other song about a year later, Living by Numbers, which is probably based on this, the whole era of digitization of stuff.
Mm.
Yeah, it's basically kind of that era and that kind of coming in now everywhere, not just
Yeah,
in recording, in life.
yeah. I find it interesting as well, that it sits in this whole like Venn diagram of ideas because you've got the clock
Yeah,
sound in the music. You've got that very regimented, digital, precise music. You've also got this idea of sort of rushing through life quickly.
mm,
And it feels to me like that fits the world of disco really well because yeah, like one of the big themes of disco music and disco as a scene was escapism. You
right.
had people working really hard during the week in order to get away from it all, and so it's like rushing through the working week in order to get to the weekend. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah,
that's how it works in like Saturday Night Fever. So it feels to me this busyness and this running to get ahead. It feels like it does fit other disco tropes, basically. But
yeah,
there's
definitely.
also, yeah, and there's also I can't go too far without going on to my big meta ideas. What I like doing on this channel is to show how Spark songs relate to each other. Because I mean, all Sparks fans know this to a degree. Because you've got songs like, "Here in Heaven," and "Number One Song in Heaven," and "Just Got Back from Heaven," and they tend to take these themes, like lots of songs with the word "fun" in the title. But my theory is they do it very precisely and deliberately on every single song. And that's what we see here because Beat the Clock gives the air of competition, of getting in there first and, winning basically. And Tryouts for the Human Race is, very much about competition, getting in first place, being that first sperm to fertilize the egg. And then in Academy Award performance, it talks about, here's your golden trophy, and you get a golden trophy for getting in first place.
Mm,
Then it links to La Dolce Vita with the repeated words. In La Dolce Vita, every line is followed by La Dolce Vita, just as every line here is followed by Beat the Clock. So it
yeah,
fits in the world that they've already established
yeah,
for they've already established on Number One in Heaven. So
yeah,
my feeling is I'm going to go into this in a lot more detail in the next episode, which is My Other Voice. But my my feeling is for this all relates to Sparks because they want to be the first band to corrupt disco music, which they do by making a song intended for the dance floor with Number One Song in Heaven and putting references to death in it. And I think they wanted to be the first band to corrupt disco music, and they knew that it was only a matter of time until other songwriters got in there and brought this songwriter's sensibility. So yeah, that's my theory about it in the big picture of what I think this song is about.
I mean, yeah, and one element of that which relates back to tryouts is these mysterious backing vocalists.
Hmm.
There are credited on the album. I don't know if it's them on "You Got to Beat the Clock," "You Got to Beat the Clock." It
Yeah.
sounds like this. It sounds like it's about three people. But if you remember on tryouts, I said that they gave the effect of this sort of male competition.
Yeah.
Certainly in the case of the tryouts of the human race. So maybe it's the same here. It's sort of like it's society. It's competition. It's you got to beat the clock. You got to, and it's
Hmm.
repetitive. And
Yeah.
and I can't. I don't honestly think they sat there or stood there and said that 30 times through a recording of a song. I can't believe they did. I'm sure there's some looping going on there. Maybe they did it once and it was just triggered or looped. So that's an interesting question. Was that an early case of vocal looping? Who knows? Otherwise, it was because they're so locked on every single time. You can't believe that every single time they did it, it was that perfect.
Yeah, that's true. And it brings me to the other thing as well, which is the live performance of it, where instead of getting the backing band to sing Beat the Clock or having it as a sample, if it was a newer performance, Russell sings it every time. And
Yeah, it's incredible.
it's got to be exhausting.
It's brilliant. That's fancy, isn't it? It's just that's so them that he would do that.
Yeah,
It's
that's
just
they always go further than they need to go because
yeah,
if they did Beat the Clock without those backing vocals, people would be fine with it. People would understand if Russell didn't sing Beat the Clock like 50 odd times in this one song, like his own backing vocalist. So yeah, I've got
about that is that you see we always talk about the structure of these songs and how they play with pop structures. Now, this is one of those weird songs where what actually is the chorus? Because the bit that you would assume the chorus isn't really the bit that people sort of remember. If I said to someone, oh, how does Beat the Clock go? They'd go, oh, that one that goes, you got to beat the clock, you got to beat the clock. No one would go, that one that goes, well, I've seen everything there is. So what's the actual chorus here? And if you think about a chorus in terms of its roots, I think, is it Greek tragedy? So you'd have the chorus coming on and they would comment and they would chant almost. So in a sense, you could say that in the most traditional sense, the chorus of this song is that, or maybe a refrain, you got to beat the clock, you got to beat the clock. But certainly has pattern. And so that's the kind of interesting way of having a song where the hook, if you like, isn't strictly speaking what would normally be the chorus.
Yeah, that's true. But plus, thinking about it, when it does get to the bit that you would traditionally think is the chorus that you were talking about with I've seen everything there is, I've done everything there is. After that, when it goes, you got to beat the clock, you got to beat the clock. He goes higher pitched. I'm not going to try and sing how Russell Mael sings that because nobody wants that. But he goes into this falsetto. And even with the chorus, it feels like it's building to go somewhere higher and higher. And there's this point in the song where like all the arpeggiators sit on this settled, like there's like this note for it builds up to basically. When we get to it, hopefully it'll make more sense. But yeah, it's a song that keeps on like elevating and yeah. So what I was trying to get at, sorry, is that while usually the chorus, as soon as you'd get there, it'd be this big release. This is still taking you to something beyond the chorus. You know?
I just looked up. I just lost you.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, you were just saying about. You were just saying about the note, that sustained note.
Yeah,
it builds up sustained note, and then
that's right. So it gets to the bit where Russell uses his soprano to say, "You got to beat the clock. You got to." I'll sing it. You got to beat the clock. You got to beat the clock. You got to. After that bit, it still feels like it's going somewhere else. It's. I haven't explained that very well, so let's carry on, and I'll make something of that in the edit, I'm sure. But yeah. Yeah, well, is there anything else worth going into before we go into the verse?
Actually, just one thing. So you mentioned the sustained note. I would say that sustained note forms the basis for this.
Right.
This because this is the accompanying 12-inch on blue vinyl. Great photo.
Oh, I love that.
Is that Syndromes or was that Seats? I don't know quite what those things are. But...
Oh, I don't know.
Yeah, it might be.
It's first time I see it. I love the label on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's nice. Yeah, it's the first time I've seen it.
And but yeah, the reason I bring it up is because it's really radical, the 12-inch. And I think when we're looking at this song, I do wonder if it was, again, while they're doing it, they were like, rather than doing the long one on the album, we'll do a shorter one on the album and then put a kind of extended version. I don't know if they themselves were involved in that, but it really does. It, rather than just being like the normal song extended, it's almost taken that drone note that you talked about, and then it's taken that, and it takes the middle section drum, which we'll come on to, and it just builds like a whole new song around it. But it's interesting that, like you say, the kind of normal vocal bit gets to that point, then there's a whole weird sort of like section which we'll come on to, but it's that section which is basically the 12-inch. So it's
I love that section, and I can see why they'd want to explore it more. It's so unique. So yeah, so we'll get onto that in shortly. So shall we listen to the first verse?
I was born a little premature. Mom just couldn't take no more. Had no time to learn to cry. Goodbye, mom, I got to fly. Bye, 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 bye.
So that opening line is one of the all-time classic opening lines, as far as I'm concerned. This, I was born a little premature. It sets up the song really well. This idea that this guy is rushing through life and ticking off his goals early on, but it works really well as a reference back to Sparks, because this album was a rebirth for Sparks, and they already played that out on the first track, on Tryouts for the Human Race. It's all about conception. It's sex, but from the point of view of sperm. By saying they're premature, they were born a little premature, it's like saying they had this history. It can be referencing their past as an established band who were coming out as a brand new band. And I think it fits the whole ethos of the album, because Sparks are number one in heaven. Despite sounding like nobody but Sparks, it sounds like a completely new band. Mom just couldn't take no more. That's a really funny line as well. Actually, one of the things, just going off on a slight tangent, this song is really funny. And not many of the songs on number one in heaven have got those sort of laugh out loud moments that you associate with Sparks albums. But this song is really, really funny. So yeah, Mom just couldn't take no more. Had no time to learn to cry. Goodbye, Mama. Got to fly. Bye, 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 bye. And I think this is looking back on their history. I think the verses in this song is looking back at what Sparks have achieved. On the second album, Woofer in Tweeter's Clothing, this way of working that I describe in all my videos, I think that started on the second album. It's an album that addresses maturity in a few places, like maturity as a band. So, for instance, in Beaver O'Lindy, it says, I'm 1 minute older, I'm doing all right, I'll gain valuable experience in front of you tonight. They say my voice is going to change. And then it's got references to like London and things, when that's what they were planning on doing next. But then on the next album, you've got Amateur Hour, which is also about being immature. And I think being immature as a band. So I put out a whole video on that. Yeah. But my feeling is that this line, I was born a little premature, it's calling back to these early albums where they were talking about being immature and almost like intentionally being immature in order to... I think they saw a long career for themselves, even at that point, and wanted to intentionally sort of not go to being huge rock stars immediately. I think they wanted to dial it back and be a smaller band. I can justify that with the title of the album, which is A Woofer in Tweeter's Clothing. A woofer is a big, loud speaker.
Yeah.
A tweeter is a quiet speaker. So if you're a woofer, but you're dressed up as a tweeter, then that can explain the sound of the album, where it was very lo-fi. Instead, when we knew what they were capable of for Kimono My House, it was a very lo-fi album. There's also that line, I dreamt I was a basement tape. And a basement tape is something that, like Bob Dylan released some basement tapes. So he recorded them at home and just put them out just as a little lo-fi 4-track. So if Sparks are acknowledging that A Woofer in Tweeter's Clothing is a basement tape, then that has to be relative to the big productions that were coming later. So I'm going well off Beat the Clock here. But they're saying I was born a little premature. So they're talking about maturity there. But then it says, like, Mom just couldn't take no more, had no time to learn to cry, goodbye mama, got to fly. And back on that same album, on A Woofer in Tweeter's Clothing, there are references to falling out with their mother. And by their mother, I don't mean Ron and Russell Mael's mother. I mean it symbolizes something. I think it might symbolize like the original group. But on A Woofer in Tweeter's Clothing, it says, this is Moon Over Kentucky. It says, cut your ties with this possessive mother, she'll destroy you. Cut your ties and find another who will respect you. So it's this bad relationship with a mother and going away, which fits really nicely with Mom just couldn't take no more, then goodbye mama, got to fly. So the bad relationship with the mother and leaving are on both songs, as well as the opening line to A Woofer in Tweeter's Clothing, which is, I wish my folks were gracious hosts and not dismayed. So yeah, I mean, it's not something that I've got completely figured out, but I've just got a feeling there's something going on there that, you know, whenever Ron and Russell decide to tell us what these songs are all about, I'm sure there's something there.
Well, something, I mean, I don't know how it relates, but God of Flow, there's another trope, isn't there? The plane wrecks. Like you've got the indiscreet cover, terminal dive, Aeroflot. So whenever they're doing any kind of act of self-sabotage, it's almost like of the plane deliberately. Regarding the mother thing, so how do you think that kind of relates to the band? I mean, do you think that's actually something to do with their own psychology? Is that some kind of autobiographical thing?
I think anytime they write it is never about anything personal unless it relates to songwriting or the creative process. That's my feeling. So my gut feeling about it, and I won't know for sure until I start making a video about it, until I start writing about it, because that's when I get the ideas on it. But I think I think it's to do with the band itself.
Okay, yeah.
I think when they're talking about I wish my folks were gracious hosts and not dismayed. I think like a host can be a temporary thing. I think Ron and Russell always intended to leave Bearsville and to leave the rest of the band. Again, it sounds bonkers without me going into basically, if I start going into it now, it won't be a Beat the Clock video. It'll be a Paul rambling video. So, but I hope to justify it one day. I think there are lots of symbols that they use all the time that come up over and over again. Look, when they're talking about a girl, they're talking about one of their own songs, you know, or the creative muse. And that's full of, there are lots of things like that in their music where towns come up a lot. The cold comes up a lot.
Literally on the spot while we're talking. Bye, 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 bye. Au revoir. Hasta mañana.
Yeah, that's
Different
true.
ways to
That's
say
true.
goodbye. Yeah.
Yeah,
So I wonder if there's a connection there.
yeah. No, well, oh, all over, all over indiscreet and propaganda
Yeah.
references to leaving. It's
Yeah.
absolutely chock full of them. It's one of those things where as soon as you notice one, several of them come
Bon
out.
voyage as well. That's the same, isn't it?
Exactly, yeah, exactly. Well, and Bon Voyage is about not being able to leave as well. And my theory is
Yeah.
they wanted to leave the United Kingdom,
Yeah.
but they had a free album obligation.
Yeah.
So the second album, they get to the end of it, they want to go but can't. So then it's a song about animals going onto the ark, onto
Yeah.
Noah's Ark, and leaving, but they're forced to stay. So I think it's because they were forced to stay for one more album.
So
But
do you
yeah,
think that all these lyrics in Beat the Clock, do you think they're basically condensing down pretty much their entire output into like 4 lines and they're almost simply words?
yeah, I think it's definitely
Yeah.
referencing their own story because I think they've got this amazing story that they've had right from the start that they keep on building on that they
Yeah.
haven't shared yet, and people will. Yeah, there are a lot of strange things about Sparks. For unlike any other band, that people just don't question. And I
Yeah.
think when you start looking at what story they could be telling, it explains why their story goes off in so many crazy directions. It explains why they're still making music in their 80s. I was going to say with the bye as well, and all of these songs about leaving that you mentioned and references to leaving on particular
Yeah.
albums. If you look at The Girl Is Crying in a Latte, the title track there has a girl leaving.
Yeah.
Now she's leaving this place. Then there's When You Leave.
They'll be breaking out the hard stuff when you leave. They'll be breaking out the chit chat when you leave. They'll be breaking out the making out when you leave. They can't wait. They can't wait.
Half the songs have got these references to leaving on it, and I think it's for when they go in somewhere new as a band.
Okay.
Is how I see it. And bye. That's 7 buys, and this
Yeah.
is album number 8. So that might be absolutely nothing. But what if for every album they said goodbye to something? They said after Kimono, they said goodbye to Martin Gordon. After
Yeah.
Propaganda, they said goodbye to Adrian Fisher. You know, it could be about what they've sacrificed, I suppose, because like Martin Gordon, Adrian Fisher, such talented musicians that they threw away. But I've got a video on Kimono My House where I talk about this self-sacrifice of intentionally getting rid of good musicians
Yeah.
in order to force them to go somewhere new. But yes, that was
Well, even
like
Crazy Boys as well, doesn't he say something like once in a while your daddy has to be leaving, or is there something like that?
oh, what's that? Sorry,
Boys,
once in a while.
Boys, doesn't he go something like once in a while I have to be leaving, or your daddy has to be leaving?
Ah, okay. Yeah, I'll have to have another look at that
Yeah.
because I haven't. Yeah, because
Yeah.
I did a video on Terminal Jive as well, but skimmed over it quite a lot to try and get the main point through. So yeah, I'll
Yeah.
have a look at that. Thank you.
But I really do like the idea. I mean, yeah, we can argue whether these are specific or not, but I think it's definitely a case to be made that they're talking about their own career in like 12 words or however few words. It's like
Yeah,
everything down into like such a short, such a short space, which is all part of the pop format, isn't it? And it's
yeah,
you make, it's they've got to condense all this wit and intelligence and sort of high art into 3 minutes, 4 minutes tops.
mm,
And so this is how they're doing it. They're almost telling a story. And I
yeah,
just want to say as well, Russell's vocals, I think probably my favorite on the whole album on this one.
yeah.
The bye 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 and the whole attitude of it. It's kind of punky. It's definitely punky. It's definitely new wave, and it's amazing how he's still him. But we were talking last time about how fashions have changed so much since the kind of the glam era, and the whole aesthetic of music, so different now. And yeah, Beat McClure, I think, just totally encapsulates this new music. It's so it could not have come out even, well, maybe 78. Couldn't have come out 77. Couldn't have come out 76. No way 75. It's so pretty much 80s, really, isn't it? It's like the dawn of the 80s. Yeah, it's just basically it definitely feels like you're traveling through time at hyperspeed.
Yeah.
Society felt like that in those days.
Yeah.
Well, it does now. It always does.
Yeah.
This was real. You think computers were coming in, home computers about this time. And it was obviously politically in UK. This was when Thatcher came in and coming up for Reagan in America. So a whole new kind of paradigm of the 80s,
Yeah.
the yuppie thing, and this sort of fast living, fast cars, maybe designer drugs or whatever. Not the males themselves, obviously, and I want to make that clear. They're talking about things and people in these things. It's not in that sense. And although they're talking about themselves, maybe as a band, I don't think it's about them as people. And this is the really tricky thing, isn't it? When we talk about autobiographical, and particularly with Ron's lyrics and what he's talking about and who he's talking about, it's weird because it feels like it's about their own experiences, but it's not. Clearly, the protagonist in this song, is a made-up person. Nobody was, literally. You can't take it literally.
Yeah.
So, in that sense, I suppose it's an inherently meta song, maybe one of the first or most overtly meta Spark songs of a lot, where the character, well, maybe not the first, but a really good example where there is no kind of obvious scenario in this song.
Yeah.
It's inherently meta. It's inherently cartoon-like.
Yeah.
Everything's extreme, cartoon. The characters here, there is just kind of plain take it as it is because you can't. It's someone who left school when they were PhDs when they were 2.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, on that note, should we go on to the next verse so we can cover that line? So for this bit, the line is, entered school when I was 2, PhD that afternoon. And that's a big Sparks trope as well, because it's young genius. And young genius, I mean, I think the earliest example I can think of is Talent is an Asset, which stars a young Albert Einstein. It's delivered by Albert Einstein's doting mother, who's talking about how clever he is and how far he's going to go. And it's something that came out throughout their career. For example, the title Little Beethoven is Beethoven as a child. Annette is about a baby with this remarkable singing talent. So I think I think Sparks in their songs are the first people to call Sparks geniuses. I think they hide these references in their songs to how great they are. Like for instance, in How Do I Get to Carnegie Hall? This technical facility, old world sensibility, all of this I did for you. In Academy Award performance that we were talking about recently, it's well-rehearsed, clever lines. What is it? Well-rehearsed, clever lines, something well-defined. So I think they're always talking about how great they are. And I think that's another example here where they're putting themselves as being young geniuses. Entered school when I was 2, PhD that afternoon. It really does fit, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. there's there's also this obsession with youth that I think ties in with the bands wanting to stay young. The song Forever Young is an example of that. I think a lot of what they do is, or the reason they kept on reinventing themselves is to constantly be a new, young, upcoming band.
Yeah,
Even when they'd, had huge success in the UK, then they had huge success in France, but they would, they would constantly reinvent themselves just as they were getting momentum with a particular sound.
yeah,
So I think, yeah, that's a callback as well for to enter school when I was 2.
yeah.
I've got a theory. Sorry if I'm going on a bit long here, but I've got a theory that when it says entered school when I was 2, then got divorced when I was 4, it could be that rather than being the ages of this character, it could be the album number. So it could fill out some of their story. So entered school when I was 2. That again would be a woofer in tweeter's clothing. And I said earlier that I think that's when they started this method of writing songs. And Ron says as much in the Sparks Brothers documentary. He says that Girl from Germany was like a new start for the band somehow. But in that case, entering school, it's like that's where you go to learn. And what I was saying earlier with the basement tapes and with intentionally making this lo-fi album, it's maybe that was because so that they could focus on getting their form of songwriting exactly right,
Right.
rather than going and getting a big audience and a big fan base. And rather than leveling up the band, they stayed in school effectively. And there's a line in one of the songs in Angus Desire. It says, "Summer heat ebbs, romance denied. It's back to school, that good old college try." And I hadn't heard "good old college try" before. I had to look that up, and it's like it's in order to give it your best shot. So
Okay.
here, if it's saying "summer heat ebbs,"
Yeah,
then that's like that can be the heat of putting out summery pop songs for everybody loves. And so if that ebbs, that's
yeah.
like putting it to one side. And romance denied, it's like keeping, they've got all of that in them, but they're not doing it yet. Instead, they're going back to school so they can give it their best shot. So that can tie in.
I just think I totally think that it can totally be seen through the lens of just the really summing up the band in kind of the history of the band.
Yeah.
Not being any more specific. But like I say, it's with the other songs we can look at scenarios and stuff, and with this one, it's just in my mind, it's just so cartoony.
Yeah.
But I can only really think of it in meta terms.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
That line about got divorced when I was 4, if that is album number 4, then that makes it propaganda.
okay.
And I suppose they got divorced from Martin Gordon at the end of the 3rd album, and that's a big feature of my Meta Guide to Kimono My House video. It could also be divorcing the record label, even though they didn't leave straight away. It could be, severing ties. So, I mean, I haven't got anything concrete on it, but these words kind of invite like theorizing about them. So,
Yeah, yeah. Well, they certainly paint like I say, a cartoon-like picture,
mm,
definitely. And it's another case where Ron, it's Ron's songwriting essentially, or lyric writing, let's say, and it's Russell singing, so it just presents this very strange, absolutely Sparksian. I don't know what the word is, but a paradox of
mm.
and which they played on with some of the videos of the idea of, is Russell just a puppet? Ron, no, of course not, absolutely not, no from it. But there is an element of him mouthing Ron's words. So
Yeah.
whenever it's autobiographical, it's not just a case of is it which one's autobiography. It could be one.
Yeah.
They just, I mean, it's an opportunity to just say, who they are as people. I mean, we don't know anything about them as people. We've done 3 episodes of this, and we've not even wanted to know, and that's the amazing thing.
Yeah.
It doesn't really matter, other than that. How the hell do these people just keep this thing going?
Yeah. No, I absolutely agree with all of that. I think, these two were so different. You wouldn't believe they were brothers,
Man,
unless you were told about it. But the whole mixture of introverts and extroverts, I think that's one of the amazing things about Sparks.
yeah,
Having, this good-looking pop singer with all the moves and this big teen following and singing all these angsty songs about
yeah.
wanting to look better, and yeah, oh yeah, absolutely brilliant.
When I've seen everything there is, I've done everything there is. I did everyone but this. Now I'm even in all this. No time for relationship. Skip the 4-minute rip. Gotta beat the clock. You 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 gotta beat the clock.
Okay, well, there's a couple of things I said earlier that I'm going to draw upon now. So the first thing I said was that what actually is the chorus of this song. In some ways, this feels like it's the natural chorus. It follows on from the verse, but it's not necessarily the main hook. The other notable thing about it is that it's got the 16th beats that started tryouts. So after the 8 beats, which the verse had that kind of chunky clock like do 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 do. We switch up to the 16th, which sounds epic. It really just sounds planet-sized. And it's a great chord progression, and it just flows really well. Yeah, Russell, the way he comes out with the "you got to beat the clock," it's my favorite Russellism on the whole album. I think that both times he does it, but probably just no, both times because they're slightly different. But to me, it's sort of this repressed weirdness. Like you can feel they've had to. Okay, we've got to have this hit record. We've got to beat the clock. We're under a lot of pressure now. We've got to kill Hiro Murata. We've got all these people. He's just won an Academy Award. We've got all this. We've got to have a hit. Money. We're probably in debt, and yet they just can't help themselves but go a bit crazy, and it all comes out. You got to beat the clock. It's absolutely wonderful, and again, it's just. I mean it. I don't know how you describe it, but it's just absolutely so unique. No one ever does things like that on pop songs.
Yeah.
Maybe just a few years later, but that's a whole other story.
Yeah, it's true. It is a really unusual chorus, isn't it? Well, what I was saying earlier, hopefully I can do a better job of explaining what I'm getting at with it. But it says, when it gets to "you got to beat the clock," you got to beat the clock. It's the way the chorus is almost taking you to a new plateau afterwards.
Yeah.
So it's almost like the release that you'd usually get with the chorus comes after it when it goes back to the dong danga dong dong danga dong. Do you know what I mean? It kind of builds, and then you go, yeah, there we go. Then it resolves.
Well, maybe it's
Yeah.
because the kind of the bass is going down, but Russell's going up. So the bass is going and Russell's going beat the clock, beat the clock, beat the clock. So each time the gap between the bass and the vocal, it's a weird musical effect, but it does just kind of open up.
Yeah. Oh, I haven't noticed, but yeah. It's almost like the chorus is what you hear in the introduction, just that arpeggiator. It feels like that's the real hook of the song, isn't it? It's what you were saying earlier with if you ask people to hum it, they're not going to say, I've done everything
Or
that
it's
is. They're gonna,
it's sort of it's playing with song structure, isn't it? It really is.
yeah.
Uh,
I mean, that's something that's quite common in a lot of like modern chart songs. You'll get a chorus followed by like a big drop, and it almost turns the chorus into a bridge. Into it's part of a journey. It's not where it resolves, and that's true in a lot of current pop songs.
there's a couple
So
of songs way back that I think have absolutely just blatantly ripped this song off, and check these ones
okay,
out. Uh, check out. I mean, you probably know Lip Sync, Funky Town, but if you listen to
yeah,
that, you'll hear like the intro is almost the same. The whole thing of
oh,
it's very. It just sounds
hmm,
like Beat the Clock. It's got that clock-like rhythm. It kind
hmm.
of opens out. So I think it's sonically very influential. And then a bit later in the 80s, a really weird song. You probably don't remember this, but there was a very obscure song called Male Stripper.
Oh,
But
man to man.
yeah, that is
Yeah.
almost note for note Beat the Clock. Was a mouse game around. I go, oh,
Oh, okay, okay. Yeah, I'll cut those in. Yeah.
yeah, and I'm sure there's others, but it's definitely a song that's had an impact beyond probably most of the other songs on this album in strange places.
Hmm.
And yeah, it's the 12-inch took that even further, I think.
Yeah. An interesting thing I don't know if it's the 12-inch version or if it might just be the alternative mix, but when it gets to this part of the song,
Hmm.
there's a melody line that was
Yeah,
cut
there is.
out of the original.
Well, I've seen everything there is, I've done everything there is, I've been everyone for this. Now I'm even better on this. No time for relationships, simply more than everything. Gotta beat the clock. You gotta beat the clock. You gotta beat the clock. You gotta beat the clock.
Yeah, the do 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 do. Yeah. So it's interesting that they stripped that away for the final version of it. I think they
Yeah,
were right to be honest. I mean, I do like it, but I think the how stripped down Beat the Clock sounds that's one of the selling points for the song for me. But it completely transforms it when you've got that melody line played underneath.
yeah, and then I mean, I think what's interesting is that this we talked a bit about this before, but it's like the relationship between there's actually different. There's the 7-inch cuts out a bit of the middle bit of the album version,
Mm,
and you've got that version, a pure radio version. You've got the album version, and then you've got the 12-inch. This is one of those songs where right from the off there was no just definitive version of it. There were
yeah.
three versions, from the off. So
Mm,
it's very much a sense of how did they do these re-edits? Did the males do this? Did other people do it? You must have had looping because
mm,
you can tell with the 12-inch, and someone talked about these drum effects that you can hear that there's flange and stuff going on, and
mm.
it kind of reverb on all the drums. So
Yeah.
it's I guess my question is, was this sort of simultaneous to the album recording?
Mm,
Uh, how did it all link up with that in terms of porting the files and saving
yeah.
different to the song?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. How was it? How the hell did they put it together? I got no idea. On those mixes you're talking about, because they start with the instrumental section that we'll be going to soon, the drums. To be able to hear those in isolation is an incredible thing because the however they mic'd up the drum kit, like that's real genius because you get such a sense of space and the way it sits in the stereo mix. I mean, it might have been multi-tracking. I think you mentioned something about
Yeah,
multi-tracking the
the
drums.
whole drum sound on this album, which is such a geeky section of the chat, but if anyone's interested in drum sounds, I mean, the whole
Mm.
drum sound on this album, I think, is really unique. And you compare it to, like, to me, the bog standard Marauder Munich kind of drum sound is Terminal Drive. That's a
Yeah,
lot more in keeping with Donna Summer, say, Hot Stuff and stuff, Love's Unkind. You can hear Keith, once you know Keith Force's fills and stuff, you can hear him a mile off. You can hear it, and he's even on that Elton John thing. Have you ever heard "Victim of Love"?
I
Elton's.
haven't. No.
Well, it's almost like Elton's Terminal Jive, let's say. Uh, it sounds the same musicians, I think. It's probably Harold Faltermeyer in there. So there's very much your standard Marauder drum sound.
Yeah.
And Number One in Heaven doesn't have that. It's got something
Yeah.
different. So
Oh,
I
interesting.
certainly assume that the Maels are involved with that decision. Whether it's some kind of weird delay on it, uh, it's a really strange drum sound because it's like a micro delay or something. I
Yeah.
can't explain it.
I
But
know what you mean. There's like a thud.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's but it's throughout the album, and I think it comes to its fore in obviously Beat the Clock. It's almost well, we'll get to that very shortly, but with drums kind of take center stage, really.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so yeah, we can talk about that in more detail shortly. Before we go to that, I just wanted to say about the lyrics
Yeah,
because it says, I've seen everything there is, I've done everything there is. I think this is calling back to Sparks' history as well, in
yeah,
terms of how they've covered so many pop genres throughout their career.
yeah,
So I see it as them saying, yeah, we've done everything. Because you've got similar songs. Nothing to do is another song like this where it's talking about having nothing left to do. It's got that line, "If I had a million thumbs, I'd twiddle twiddle, but I just have two, nothing to do." And I think that's saying that they've got nothing that they necessarily wanted to do at that time. Then on La Dolce Vita, it ends with life isn't much, but there's nothing else to do. And of course, disco songwriting is about life. And, you know, it's an album that ends with death. So it ties in that way as well. So to say I've seen everything there is, I've done everything there is, it's like saying they've achieved everything. So it's almost like they're forced to go down the electronic route. I mean, they could have made like a jazz fusion album, I suppose, but that's not pop and that's not
yeah.
Sparks. So everything they do is in this pop framework, and they've done it all apart from going the electronic route. So that's how I understand I've seen everything there is. But then there's the question of who the bloody hell is Liz?
The
Because it could be the Queen, it could be Liz Taylor.
two obvious candidates, aren't they?
Yeah.
Have a resonance, I think.
Mm,
And maybe they relate to some of the other songs. If we're talking Academy Award performance, obviously
mm.
it's Taylor. But if we're
Yeah.
talking about going to England and having hits in England, then the Queen.
Yeah.
So, you know, from an
Yeah.
American perspective, going to London, oh, did you see the Queen? You know,
It's such a funny rhyme as well, though, isn't it? I've seen
yeah,
everything there is. I've done everything there is. I've met everyone but Liz. I just think it's laugh out loud funny. And
yeah.
now I've even met old Liz.
Well, think
So
about yeah, because that's brilliant. That's actually wow, that's meta Paul, because he's writing the song in real time, and when he's written that first line, he goes, "Well, I've met everyone but Liz." Then then within real time, he's actually gone and met Liz. And
yeah,
like, now I've never met old Liz. So he's
yeah.
going off and doing his stuff. He's writing something and going and doing it.
Yeah, he's going so fast for while he's writing the song, he's still achieving more of these goals and ticking
And
things off the
maybe it's
list.
running ahead, and maybe it's the song. It's like it's pulling us forward. It's like inexorable kind of speeding up.
Yeah,
It's a very
yeah.
urgent song, yeah.
Oh,
Uh,
it's fantastic.
but the fact when he says, oh, Liz," it's kind of in both cases, whoever it is, it's showing familiarity and it's showing that he's not starstruck by them. They're kind of old friends, you know. It's a bit,
Yeah,
it's putting
yeah. Just
himself up,
move through.
putting himself. Oh, just
Yeah,
yeah, I know old Liz, you know, putting himself up on that level.
yeah. It's funny. Yeah, people must have spent countless hours over the years trying to work out who Liz is. I wish I wish Ron and Russell would just tell us. But
You said before about that he's got this self-aggrandizing side, and I actually, I was a bit. I don't want to think of Ron as being arrogant, so I wanted to consider that. I think you are right, and I think that is in the lyrics. And I think what he's done in this case, he's almost made a caricature of that arrogance, and
yeah,
he's like the monster. This is monster person, This is
yeah,
not of their characters. It's almost a bit grotesque. It's so extreme, and I think that's
yeah,
what's going on here. It's just someone who's hyper arrogant, ridiculously arrogant. Uh,
yeah,
it's just comical. Yeah,
yeah,
it's funny. It's just, and again with Academy Award performance, it's so extreme and relentless. And again, La Dolce Vita and the repetition, it's so over the top, this stuff, that you just can't. It's ludicrously, it's comic. It's if
mm,
someone's got a trait in a Sparks song, they have that trait to extremes. You know what I mean? There's no half measures in Sparks characters.
yeah,
Someone
yeah,
if someone's got something going on, then they've really got it going on.
yeah. Exactly, exactly. Can I just go on to the final bit of it as well, which I think this is meta about number one in heaven itself, where it says, "No time for relationships, skip for foreplay, let her rip." And I think that's what they're doing by working with Giorgio Moroder in disco music, because other bands had done disco music before. The Rolling Stones had put out a disco record, and I can't remember who else, but what you'd have thought with a band like Sparks working with a producer like Giorgio Moroder, you'd have thought it would be 50-50 in terms of the soundscape. You'd have the
Yeah,
guitars and you'd have the bass, but you'd also have the synthesizers.
yeah,
But they chose not to do that. They chose to go 100% electronic. Well, forgetting the drums, but they went into this really electronic world. So it's skipping the foreplay. It's getting straight to it. They're coming to make this album, and they're not dipping their toes into electronic music. They're not they're not a rock band using an arpeggiator or a sequencer or synthesizers. They're a purely electronic band. So I think it's getting straight to it. It's skipping the foreplay, no hanging about, let her rip. So
and
that's how
I
I see
agree.
it.
But then even within that, there's another layer actually within that whole layer. It's like
Okay.
levels, and that layer maybe relates to the songs themselves. And what we've been saying is that, say, particularly with tryouts. Do you remember how I said that tryouts as a song, it's a long, slow builder of a song. It's got a lot of
Yeah.
foreplay, let's say, before it
Yeah.
actually gets to it.
Yeah.
And whereas with La Dolce Vita, we said there's like a minute and a half of playing with sounds. So
Yeah.
again, foreplay to the actual song. It's a long, extended song. They're almost, they're caressing our sense, if you like. If you take the
Yeah.
it's kind of luxuriant. We said it's very experimental. It's very almost indulgent.
Mm.
And yeah, with Beat the Clock, I was just saying, everyone's probably thinking, "Come on, guys, with money." So maybe it
Yeah.
was songwriting, and I said it comes straight in with the intro. There is no music foreplay to this song. It's straight in.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. It doesn't hang about, does it? It's
Like,
right there. So the song itself is skipping the foreplay.
yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, I love that.
actually make a pop record, really, isn't it?
Yeah. That's great. Yeah, that's a good place to leave the chorus then in that case. So let's go on to that crazy instrumental section.
the chorus, well, the bit that you gotta beat the clock, you get more of a chanting beat the clock, and then it goes upper key, and as we said, this sort of upper key section is what forms the basis for the 12-inch version. Uh, Now, on the album version, I did the maths in the car. I listened to it and I counted. There's 48 bars of the chime section, which is
Nice.
actually 3/16. So it's dun, 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 dun. I
Yeah.
think this is maybe sacrilegious, maybe change your opinion. I think that's 16 bars too many. I think it's just slightly too long, too repetitive. There is subtle changing in there. You get that trademark Moroder helicopter kind of whistles across. I'm sure people love it. I love the song. I don't want to hate on the song. Wisely, I think for the radio version, they trimmed that down. I think there's a real edit which is like only 16 bars, because basically it is three lots of 16. It's the same pattern.
Yeah.
So,
Oh, okay.
but
Well, yeah, it is controversial because I can't imagine it any other way. I've never got the sense that after 16 bars, I'm like, oh, get on with it, guys. But no, I think it's fair. I'm not surprised they cut it out of a single because
yeah,
it's a strange piece of music, isn't it?
it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean it's definitely cut light, and actually it works really well with video. I think this section,
Mm.
it's very visual. And I was thinking about this actually, and this is something I wanted to say on previous ones regarding the fact that this was a studio album with no hope of playing it live. That in itself would have been a real different paradigm for them, I think, and a really different way
Mm.
of working. And in terms of making the record, how are you going to promote this stuff? So
Yeah.
you need videos, and I should imagine that was probably all part of the concept from day one.
Mm.
Instead of gigging, we'll do videos, and so
Yeah.
that I think was a great kind of prototype for that.
Yeah.
But
Plus, it was music videos were quite new.
yeah,
Well,
absolutely.
kind of. Well, this town ain't big enough for the both of us had a music video, didn't it? But I think it was only Bohemian Rhapsody that made them explode
Yeah,
as a crucial part of any marketing campaign for a band. So yeah, it does make sense
yeah. But I
to
think
go
when you
all
get to
in.
the middle section, it kind of works. It's very conceptual, I think. For me, it's just a bit. I want something more to happen, but that's just
Hmm.
me. I
Yeah,
only want
it's so far every song we've talked about has had a long instrumental section, and yeah, I think this is the weakest of all the songs on the album in that sense.
Well, I don't think
But
it's
it's,
nothing. Like with La Dolce Vita, it feels like a wrong. I mean, all right, it's on a synth, but in a way, you can imagine him doing a similar solo on any kind of keyboard instrument, whether it be an organ or
mm,
a piano or electric piano. It's da 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 da. It's wrong. Like
yeah,
this is da 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 da. It's almost too simplistic.
yeah,
Knowing what Ron can do, but I don't
yeah,
want to be negative because I love this song, and in a smaller dose, this bit would have been absolutely fine for me. The
yeah,
extended version, that's fine because then they do stuff to it, like they put the effects on it, and
yeah,
it sort of switches up. Maybe there is a point, like with tryouts, I said there was that kind of frustrating angle, which I then appreciated as kind of in joke. And you said with La Dolce Vita, it kind of wrong foots you
mm,
when it's going to go to a verse. So there's a part of me that thinks that there's some kind of reason it's like this, and
yeah,
if maybe I've just not quite got it. Maybe it is something to do with repetition and monotony, and
yeah.
I don't know.
I, I, I wish I could hear it for the first time again because I know it does feel like it plays with expectations quite a lot in terms of, you know, there's some really weird. It's not a key change, is it? But the notes, there's something strange about how you think you've reached the top, and then it's like do 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 do, and then you're somewhere
Yeah,
else, and
irony.
yeah, it's worth it though for when it resolves, for when it gets to that bass note again, and
Yeah, it comes back.
yeah,
Escher
yeah,
paintings with the staircases that all go up, yet they all
yeah,
kind of like
yeah. Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, the MC Escher. I think. Yeah, yeah, I can see that. It's a good analogy.
Also,
Yeah.
one other thing, maybe on a dance floor that is actually better and it's more hypnotic, and maybe
Mm.
at home it's it sounds a bit more samey, but on a big loud club system, uh,
Yeah.
yeah, those intricacies a lot more. Uh,
Yeah.
that's the defense for it, I suppose, but it's in keeping with the disco extended format.
Yeah.
It's very rhythmic. I'll say that the drumming is great. I can't fault that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's
Uh,
absolutely brilliant.
it's a welcome relief when the clocks come back and
Yeah.
we're back in. Yeah, so it's interesting. It's definitely interesting.
Yeah, I think it feels worth it for when it resolves.
Yeah,
It's bizarre. It's very stripped down compared to other parts of it. But yeah,
yeah,
it's for those drums make it all worthwhile.
yeah. But you know what we were saying about Sparks is so tight normally, and
Mm.
it's kind of a bit out of character to have something that's so well minimal in a way. But I suppose we have had glimpses of it in the album before. Yeah.
I'm wondering like how it was written because it when Sparks did the Two Hands One Mouth tour, which was just Ron and Russell, keyboards, microphone, and nothing else. The encore they'd use an arpeggiator on the keyboard. So on one of the tours they did number one song in Heaven, and on I think the first time they toured it, they did Beat the Clock,
Seen it.
almost inclusive, almost acoustically. It makes me wonder, do you think, because it's Ron playing a keyboard with an arpeggiator, do you think he had an arpeggiator at home and maybe wrote a lot of the album like that?
Well, it's funny. I seem to remember reading a story that this was one of the only songs that they had even a demo of before they went in, which kind
Oh,
of
really?
blew me out the water. I mean, it
Hmm.
might have been a different song, might have been different lyrics, could have just been
Yeah,
the and I seem to gather that originally it was going to be a guitar song. Just
right.
check this out, see if you can find it, if anyone can shed any light on it.
Well, there is a guitar version of it, isn't there? From it must have been around the time of Want That Sucker.
You gotta beat the clock, you gotta beat the clock. You gotta beat the clock, you gotta beat the clock. You gotta beat the clock, you gotta beat the clock. You gotta beat the clock, you gotta beat the clock. Well, I was born a little premature. Gotta beat the clock, you gotta beat the clock. Mama just couldn't take no more. Gotta beat the clock, you gotta beat the clock.
So I'm guessing it was the Bates Motel band, I'm guessing. But that's great. It works really well on guitar, this song. Have you
Yeah.
heard it?
No, I've not heard that actually. No, I'd have to check that out. But yeah, I can imagine because it's a stomping song.
Still strangely minimal when it gets to that section, though. But yeah, it's worth listening to. I'll cut it into this.
Well, I did not so traveling. Awesome being unraveling. The only that rejected me said I had 2 left feet. More than that when I was 3. Too bad there ain't none of you. Then I'll show you what I do. I'll put you on my view, and the people do too. But there's only one you.
So yeah, it's such a relief here when the song gets back to the verse, when it all clicks back into place. It's a real buzz. But again, absolutely love the lyrics here. You've got I did lots of traveling, parts of me unraveling. The army then rejected me, said I had 2 flat feet, wore them out when I was free. So the traveling, I think, is referring to touring because for this album and the album that preceded it, introducing Sparks, they decided not to tour. For number one in Heaven, they've always said that they didn't tour because the technology wasn't there. I'm not quite sure I believe that, because I think you could still. There are ways to work around it. You know, Gary Newman was playing live at the time. Kraftwerk had been playing live for a fair few years there. I mean, maybe they just didn't desire it, but to an extent, I think you could have gotten away with, you know, having the keyboard parts on tape. I think people would have been fine with it. So I don't really buy. I think they didn't want to tour it
Yeah,
because touring is something that a rock band would do, and they were a disco band.
yeah.
So that's my theory there. But I think they were a bit fed up of touring at this point. So I did lots of traveling, parts of me unraveling, or it could also be a reference to when they travelled to, you know, live in the United Kingdom to do like 3 albums. Obviously, that had quite a detrimental effect being pop stars. Ron Mael being a being so introverted, I think being around all that hysteria during the island years, I think it would have been like quite a lot. He doesn't seem like the sort of person who would enjoy that. So that's what I think this is referring to. I think it's
What about the fact that it's about maybe the band itself? So parts of the unraveling is people leaving the band. So
yeah.
it's a duo.
That well, that way of looking at it actually ties into the next part of it, which is the army then rejected me, said I had 2 flat feet, because on propaganda and indiscreet, there are lots of little like army references, not least reinforcements,
Wow.
and that's got references to like bringing in new people to be on his left flank and his right to
Yeah.
replace the old people. There's a line about I'd rather work for PX tonight, with PX being post exchange. So post exchange being that's they're exchanging somebody's post. Basically, their job in Sparks is being replaced by somebody else. So with the army then rejected me, it feels like it's about the relationship with their record label, sort of going down the pan a little bit, maybe. But then said I had 2 flat feet, wore them out when I was 3. So following the rules I was talking about earlier, that would be Kimono My House. So Kimono My House were when they were at their absolute most popular. It was when they were right in the center of the storm. They were the biggest new band in Great Britain. So yeah, I think
Army,
that's
uplift the record buying army, if you like.
yeah. That could be yeah, and like
It-
wore them out when I was 3. So you know, said I had
Yeah,
2 flat
clearly.
feet. It was like it was too much work for that to be sustainable without damaging their creative drive, and the creative drive is the most important thing to Ron, is how I see it.
It's
So
like quite funny. Think of flat feet as meaning you can't dance. So it's just quite
yeah,
funny. I would have on a disco record, and it's
yeah,
a very boastful song. It's self-deprecating in that way.
yeah, exactly.
This is so wrong. This is why I love it. These people, these characters, they're so. It's this is when I say the kind of discombobulating. It's like they take you off in a direction. The guy's really bigging himself up, but
Mm.
then suddenly he's putting himself down. Or the army
Oh
reject.
yeah,
It's strange.
yeah. It's a huge contradiction, isn't it?
Yeah,
But that's what I love
that's quite
about him.
cool, isn't it? From to
Yeah,
it's real self-aggrandizing to like the lowest of the low. Yeah,
yeah. So yeah, this is one of my favorite lines as well. This is one that I think is it's got quite a satisfying meta interpretation of it.
okay.
It says, well, on face value first, it says, too bad there ain't 10 of you. Then I'd show you what I'd do. I could cheat on 5 of you and be faithful to you two, but there's only one of you. And in terms of the main song, it kind of it makes sense in that it started off quite young. He's gone through his life, and now he's settling down in this relationship. But
Yeah,
even that is something that he's doing at impossibly fast speeds.
yeah,
But if we look at it as talking about genres of music or talking about disco, you know what I was saying earlier about having nothing to do. They've done everything there is, right?
yeah,
So it's almost like saying that their only choice was to go to make disco music at this point. And it ties into what I was saying on Trials for the Human Race as well. But I won't go off on that tangent. But if anybody watches that episode, what I say about the bridge in there is the same theory that they're kind of disco music isn't necessarily where they want to be. Well, it's not what Sparks are as a band, but they want to come in, they want to make this music, make their point, and then just bugger off again and carry on. But so if it's talking about electronic music, it says, too bad there ain't 10 of you, because they've only got one choice of where to go
right,
now, is electronic music. Then I'd show you what I'd do. Then I could cheat on 5 of you and be faithful to you too. If
yeah,
that's talking about music, that's a really clever line, because you could say that Sparks are cheating by going disco music, or they're cheating on rock music by
yeah,
going this disco route. Because especially at the time, you were in one camp or the other. It
yeah,
was, all disco sucks and that. But then, and be faithful to you too. And yeah, they're being absolutely faithful to disco, because every song that we've discussed so far, we've been talking about these disco tropes that Sparks are taking and putting into their own songwriting. So it's not obvious, but it's there on every single song. So they're making an absolutely faithful disco record whilst also cheating. So yeah,
that's kind of hard dance, which, but maybe more specifically in this case, hard disco. And I think
mm,
basically that what I mean by that, I've explained it sonically and demonstrated, but it's an attitude thing, and the hardness comes from hard rock really. So it's
mm.
applying the hardness of a rock band, the heaviness, like with the power and the impact and the woofer
Yeah,
to disco music, which maybe particularly at that time was maybe getting very soft and very kind of away from its sort of funk roots, and
yeah,
everyone, Stewart and Leo Sayer doing disco records. So it's disco become very soft, and what I think you can call it oomph, you can call it
mm,
heft, whatever it is, but it's that you associate with a rock band really.
mm,
I think that's really what this is all about. This album is a heaviness and a hardness,
yeah,
not necessarily in guitars. And I think that's what they're trying. And they've talked about this in interviews. It's how can you get that heaviness across in unorthodox ways? And then again,
mm,
they did that with Little Beethoven. I think it's
yeah,
hard, heavy. There is a sort of hardness to Spark stuff, but it's unconventional.
mm,
Sometimes, one big beat, it's just all out. But I think one of the reasons their stuff does appeal to rock fans is it's really hard to describe what I mean, but it's just a feeling. It's a kind of rebellious, punky.
yeah.
If you don't like it,
Yeah,
yeah.
there's a definite attitude there. I completely agree.
And I think that's really what they an element when you talk about corrupting dance music, just
Mm.
bringing that grit to it but in an unorthodox way,
Yeah.
not a typical way.
Mm.
And I think
Yeah, it makes it.
well, when you look at a song like Rock and Roll People in the Disco World, it's exposing sort of fakes. I think
Mm.
it's sort of saying that just posturing around with guitars doesn't make you hard, doesn't make you
Yeah. Yeah,
um,
it's true.
and I think maybe introducing proof that was very lightweight. That's not hard at all. Very
Yeah,
soft,
true.
and
Yeah.
this is hard in a different way. Hard
Mm.
dance music, hard disco music. Yeah, just want to say
Yeah.
that.
No, no,
But yeah,
all
well, it
makes
relates
sense. All
on you and being faithful to you too. So it's cheating.
Sorry, could you just cut off a bit there? Could you just say that last line again?
Just to say that yes, this relates to cheating on you and being faithful with you too,
Mm.
because it's cheating on rock music by going disco, but but it's being faithful to rock music by adhering to the kind of hard, like I've said, maybe a bit psychedelic in places, or playing with sound, brain melting. When I say psychedelic, I don't mean like drug psychedelic. I just mean mind melting. I mean, and say
Yeah.
it's sort of hypnotic, disorientating. It resembles a drug, maybe, but I'm not in any way, shape, or form saying that that any able to do psychedelic drugs. I just mean sonically,
Yeah.
and in the middle section of Beat the Clock. If anything, it's a bit hypnotic like that. It's
Mm.
trance-inducing in a way.
Yeah, they definitely brought like a spirit and an attitude to
Yeah,
it that but I'm not aware of any disco music that would have had anything like that beforehand. I suppose there were things like Gary Newman that were sort of merging the two worlds a little bit, but
yeah,
it feels so different what he was doing.
but I mean, a year later, everyone was doing it. OMD, Blondie, even going with Moroder,
Mm.
uh, and all the synth bands, early Duran Duran. If you,
See, I think, so sorry to cut you off there, but I think Sparks knew that, and
yeah,
that's why they've got to beat the clock. They knew that this was like fertile ground. Nobody else had done this,
yeah,
but it was only a matter of time. And
exactly, yeah,
I mean, as influential as they were, if Sparks hadn't recorded Number One in Heaven, it's likely that Blondie would have still released disco
yeah,
records.
yeah,
Yeah, I think it is influential, but it's also that's where the world was going, and
yes,
they just had the foresight to
yeah.
be the ones to get there first. And
Well,
that's what they're saying whilst trying to get there. We've got to beat the clock. We've got to be the first.
I think its influences come in different waves. So I think you had that first era prescience, if you like, if not influence, just seeing the way that things are going and getting there first. I was going to say just very quickly, listen to Duran Duran, Planet Earth, the
Mm.
first 10 seconds of that, then listen to Tryouts.
They were on the Sparks Brothers documentary, weren't they? Gushing about Sparks, as particularly about this album. So,
I think that's the influence of this album, is it influenced people who then influenced everyone else. So it's
yeah.
2 or 3 degrees away from the public in maybe some cases.
Mm.
So the bands that it did influence, like we talked about Joy Division, they've said it outright. So Erasure, Vince Clarke, is the people on the documentary. I mean, so many.
Yeah.
You
Yes, so many
know.
people. Yeah, somebody said something about there must be a lot of bands out there who don't know, but
Yeah,
they've been influenced by Sparks, which is effectively what you're saying there, isn't it?
well, I won't forget this, the Pet Shop Boys. I mean, up to a point, I like them, but they've always denied Sparks' influence, and maybe they're right in that they've not directly influenced, but they can't deny that what they're doing is, image-wise, just one Sparks album turned into a
Yeah,
whole. I mean, that's
an
like,
entire career. Yeah.
and
No,
I
I,
very sure if anyone likes them, and I do like them, and they've done some great songs. It's a
mm,
kind of a bit of a joke rivalry thing, I think.
yeah.
If Sparks themselves appreciated or maybe did that in some of their songs in the 90s.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's. I think when Sparks came back with gratuitous sax, they were intentionally trying to sound like the Pet Shop Boys.
They did, yeah. But then
But
they went,
even though obviously the Pet Shop Boys copied Sparks,
yeah.
they took it somewhere slightly new. But things like Go West, like that era
Oh, yeah,
of
yeah.
Pet Shop Boys, that's really close to what Sparks were doing. I think it's I think it was done on purpose because they needed a hit record because their film had just fallen through and they were
Oh, right.
absolutely. But yeah, that's that is another danger of me going off on one there.
But yeah, sorry, just to say, so that you've had these different waves of influences. So you had that first era influence, but then I think 10, like I was saying, 15 years later, then you've got the dance, the rave generation are going back to it, and they're hearing the analog electronics,
Mm,
and they're hearing that in it. And then even after that, you've got kind of in the, say, the noughties, these bands like LaRue, the new generation of
mm.
synth pop bands, Hot Chip and people, and the kind of electronic bands. What are they called? Did Kids? Oh,
MGMT.
most of the bands, you know. So even
Yeah, LCD Sound System. I think
yeah,
they sound.
absolutely.
I think a lot of LCD Sound System sounds like it was. It sounds like it was recorded in the same dingy little room as Number One
Yeah,
in Heaven, with all the synths built up.
and it always seems like there's a new generation of people that just come back to it. So it really wouldn't
Mm,
surprise me to hear Beat the Clock sampled or remixed in some form to this
mm.
day. You know,
Yeah.
I have music at work, and I hear a lot of old 80s songs kind of through the sampler,
Hmm.
and it really wouldn't surprise me if this song has another hit based on it. If anyone's watching, give it a go.
Well, I've seen everything there is. I've done everything there is. I've been everyone but this. Now I'm even metal this. No time for relationships. Sit before they're in. Gotta beat the clock. You 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 gotta beat the clock.
Okay, well, after a sort of lengthy journey, but still fairly short compared to the other songs, we finally get to the last quote, chorus unquote, and it's magnificent. It's just such a great chord sequence, and it's the sound of the kind of chugging analog synths. It sounds like the kind of steam's coming out of them and they're about to blow up. It really's got this feeling of out of control technology somehow, you know, that it's being pushed to the absolute limit of its capabilities. Even though in a way it's kind of simplistic in that there's not lots going on. We talked about this with La Dolce Vita. You said it. It's the detail. It's the attention to detail in there, and it all just gives the effect of all these sort of machines just really being pushed to the limit now. But it's all in service of a classic Sparks song, classic melody, and it's just so triumphant. That final, you gotta beat the clock. Like it just feel like he's crawled over a marathon line. And
Yeah.
he's just using a final bit of energy. And then a very interesting thing with the music, which is almost a little Easter egg, and you don't even notice it at first. But there's almost a little flashback to tryouts in the sequence they run at the very end.
Mm.
There's also almost a kind of little like. And I think that's quite interesting. It's really interesting. It's kind of little in joke, maybe going back to that first song.
Well, I find it fascinating. It's the same trick
Yeah.
with the arpeggiator. What I noticed just before recording this, it's also got the Lindrum. The Lindrums were only introduced for that section. So the end of Beat the Clock is
Yeah.
effectively the main riff of Tryouts for the Human Race. So
Yeah.
do you think maybe Tryouts for the Human Race could have emerged from Beat the Clock during the writing process?
Vice versa, maybe.
Or vice versa, yeah.
But one thing is, it's in a major key. Tryouts is in a minor. I don't know if that adds any difference to the run of notes, but it does make a difference to the kind of mood of it.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, it's how do you do it? How do you copy these songs? Can you just copy and paste from one song to another? It's not just like file copy.
Yeah.
I mean, how did you get? Because I don't know how those notes are programmed in the first place.
It's mind-boggling. I wonder if there's a reason for it. Or, well, we can only speculate, I suppose.
Just one other thing, and I want to give credit. Monty Malin came up with this theory that, you know, the song just stops very suddenly.
Beat the clock.
Exactly. So he's wondering, is that the So there's an
Yeah.
yeah. Because a lot of the songs,
It feels like they're crossing the finishing line, doesn't it?
yeah.
It feels like they're going through the ribbon. But
Only songs who have an actual full distinct ending on the whole album.
Yeah, exactly. It grinds to a halt, which I suppose makes sense. This is the start of there's a sequence of songs after this. I've mentioned it on every episode, but the sequence of songs that all talk about putting hidden meanings into the music to reference death in a disco song. That starts on the next song. So maybe they're crossing the line here, and it's like, yep, we've done it because we've got to this point where we can
Yeah,
execute what we've been planning.
yeah.
Yeah,
But they needed the hit single to do it. The whole
yeah,
thing would, needed if you want to sort of corrupt something, you needed to go somewhere. You got
yeah.
to be the
It
guys in this.
needed to make an impact.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
the whole concept of work, they needed something a hook to
yeah,
build it. So I can imagine, yeah, that having got this down, and I should imagine everyone gave it a very enthusiastic reception on hearing it,
yeah. Absolutely.
a sense of
Um,
relief.
I
Yeah.
was going to ask as well. What do you think of the plagiarism version of Beat the Clock?
Ah.
You gotta beat the clock, you gotta beat the clock. You gotta beat the clock, you gotta beat the clock.
I think I ruffled a few feathers when I put my comments online back in the days of the Sparks website.
It's like a bad memory for you. Am I bringing up a previous trauma from the All Sparks
No, because
forum?
as always with Sparks, where you think they're going off the rails, actually they're 10 steps ahead. My feeling about the whole plagiarism album is that album is basically Balls and Little Beethoven. And let's just say that the Beat the Clock was the Balls section of the album.
Yeah.
And I love all the classical versions. And it would have been interesting, really interesting to hear what they could have done if they'd done some repetitive orchestral thing. Because if you think of things
Mm,
like Your Call is very important to us,
yeah.
Beat the Clock and this is one of their sort of chant kind of trope songs where you got this sort of chant. And I don't know if
Mm,
they've done it many times before, but they'd certainly go on to do this. So in a way, even as far back as Beat the Clock, they're setting the template for these repetitive mantra
yeah.
kind of repetitive.
Yes.
Yeah,
It's true that it became fundamental to their sound for a good few years, didn't it? But yeah, you're
yeah.
right. It can be tracked right back here. I can't think of anything before this apart from the Dolce Vita. You're right, though. It's absolutely fundamental. Before I move on, I just want to say I love that theory about it being half Bowles,
Okay, yeah.
half Little Beethoven. When I first got plagiarism, I had a handful of Sparks albums. So that was the first version of Beat the Clock that I heard, and it did nothing for me. And in some ways, it kind of put me off the original version of Beat the Clock
Yeah.
when I heard that. So it was a while until I even listened to all of Number One in Heaven. But I went back to it the other day, and it stands up. Maybe I'm just getting a bit sycophantic because I love everything Sparks do. But
Well, that's
listening to that again, I absolutely loved it. The production's great.
maybe you're right. Maybe it needs to re-listen. I think it's it's context with everything with
Mm.
Sparks. Like it really does sometimes take a while to really get what they were doing and why they meant it,
Yeah.
why they switched. And I think part of the problem with with it was just an old song at a time where we wanted new Spark stuff.
Yeah. Part of the problem for me as well is this is something that I don't say very often, but I think Russ's vocals aren't really up to scratch on it. But that is compared in terms of being able to sing. I mean, obviously he hits all the notes, but you were talking earlier about this attitude on the original. It's almost like punky. It's almost got a bit of a sneer to it.
Yeah,
I don't hear any of that on the
yeah, you're right.
plagiarism version. So
Yeah,
the production's great. The actual delivery, it loses like quite a lot. So I think that's what put me off it.
but it
Um,
ties in with your theory, and this is why I say it, that it's almost like they had this split at the time where the record company is saying, "Oh, you've got all these old classic songs, redo
mm,
them, get back to a new audience," and yet they're thinking forward about wanting to do more kind of
yeah,
orchestral stuff. And it probably it was just okay. Well, this is one of the ones that knockoff, if you like. Oh,
Sorry?
just because it doesn't really fit anywhere, but a little
Yeah.
observation. I think we're at the end of the actual segment, aren't we? So
Yeah.
just this has remarkably what it is you've got the long version on one side, which is the remix, but on this side you've got the normal version. I forget if it's the 48 bars. I think it might just be 32 bars in the middle. Basically, a normal version of it.
Yeah.
Then you've got a bit of it where the needle goes in. Then you've got the most remarkable Easter egg. It is on YouTube. It's incredibly rare. It blew my mind when I first heard it. It's Peter Cook doing this sort of comedy monologue. Now, I gather that he was doing Derek and Clive for Virgin Records at the time.
Yeah.
In the studio, so or something of Virgin, but someone had the idea of getting to do these comedy sketches. There's one on tryouts as well. For this one, he pretends to be a lawyer representing God. Anyone who's not familiar with Peter Cook, he's just a wonderful comedian from the 60s, 70s, 80s. I think he died in the 90s. He's hilarious, and he's in an own way. I can see why he would kind of represent Sparks. He's a very witty, wordy guy, very surreal. So he plays a lawyer representing God, and his wish is to sue Sparks for using the term "number one in heaven." My client God will forever be number one in heaven.
Nice.
Then he says something like, "Now this is no reflection on the music within, which is actually what people are really getting down to up here." And then there's like a medley, a little mix of snippets of all 6 of the songs. So,
Nice.
yeah.
So it's like a hidden track then, by the sounds of it.
It
If the groove carries on, do you mean? Is that?
Yeah. You got the song, then the needle goes in, and then it's a good sketch.
Oh, amazing.
On the CD reissue.
Yeah, I've heard it. I've heard the sketch. I just didn't realize it was kind of tucked away like that.
Yeah.
So it looks like it was really well packaged, the whole album, with all the coloured vinyl 12 inches as well. But I love that disc there. It's like the label is bigger than a normal 12-inch.
Well, no, it's actually there isn't really a label. There's no label. That's the actual record.
Oh right, I see. Right, I see. I thought the circular bit was a label there, but it's a picture disc.
Yeah, it's.
I see. God, that's nice. Yeah.
What they look like kind of office chairs, but maybe drums or some old kit.
I don't know. I'm not sure. It looks great though. It looks stunning.
Yeah. Also got the tryouts one with the kids. Yeah, that's really cool.
Oh, that's nice. Is that a picture disc as well then?
Yeah.
Oh, nice. This has been really great. Thanks for coming on again, Ad.
Thank you very much.
Hope you've all enjoyed it as much as me and Ad have putting it together. So, if you could like and subscribe and comment, that would be fantastic. And thank you very much. Cheers. Bye.
Cheers.